In this video we're going to finish up the styling of our video player. Now we've already dealt with the video container and the progress bar container, and what's left is the buttons container. So let's get to it. I will open up our external style sheet and I will reference the buttons container by its ID. Now all I want for the buttons container is a height of 50 pixels. That's all. And if we now refresh the browser, we're going to see that the buttons container itself has resized to 50 pixels. However, all the children of the buttons container are still bigger than 50 pixels, and they're also aligned under one another while they should be next to each other. So let's fix both of those issues. I'm going to reference all the direct children of the buttons container like this. And then, to get started, I will first display them as inline blocks. And this basically allows them to float next to each other. Next, I will all give them a height of 100% so that they will all resize to their parents container, which is 50 pixels. And for now, let's also give them some outline so we can easily see where they are located. I'll give them a 1 pixel solid red outline. Now, let's refresh the browser. And as you can see, the buttons are now next to each other. They've all resized to 50 pixels high, and they all have this red container around them, so we can easily keep track of them to know where they are. Now the first thing that you're going to notice is that this time field right here isn't nicely centered within the parent container. Now we can easily fix that by setting the vertical align property on all its children to middle. And if we now refresh the browser, also the time field is nicely within its parent. Alright, the next thing that I want to do is add some margin to all of these buttons. And that's only a left and a right margin that I want to give them. So alright, margin 0 for the top and bottom, and let's give them 10 pixels on the left and the right side. And if we now refresh the browser, it looks a little bit better already. Now, this play button right here, I'm actually fairly happy with, so I'm going to leave that alone. The time field, however, I'm not. First of all, I want to change this text color, and also I want to vertically align this text within this time field. And to do that, I'm first going to reference the time field by its ID. I'm going to set the color equal to blue, so that was RGB 50, 170, 220. And I'll also set the line height equal to 50 pixels, just as its container. And this basically, this makes sure that the text gets centered in the middle of the container. If we refresh it, we now see that the color has changed and that it's nicely centered. Alright, next up is the sound button and the sound bar container, which is right here. Now, because it doesn't have any width or height at the moment, we can't see it. So let's quickly do something about that. I will reference the soundbar container by its ID, which is sbar container. I'll give it a width of 100 pixels, a height of 5 pixels, and let's also give it a light gray background color. Remember, light gray for this project was RGB 70, 70, 70. Alright, and if we refresh it, we now see this soundbar, which is also nicely centered because of that vertical align property. However, I want to remove the margin between this sound button and this soundbar container, because even though we've set a margin to the left and right on every direct child of the buttons container, I want to override it for the soundbar container and for the sound button. So for the sound button, I want to remove the right margin. So margin right, I'll set it equal to 0. And for the soundbar container, I'm going to set the margin left equal to 0. And if we now refresh the browser, you'll see that the two are much closer together. And this looks better in my opinion. Alright, now next let's style the soundbar itself, because this is just the soundbar container. I'll reference the soundbar by its ID. I will give it the same height as its parent by giving it a 100% height, and let's give it a 50% width, and let's change the background color of the actual soundbar to light blue, RGB 50, 170, 220. Alright, and if we now refresh it, we see this little soundbar right here. And of course, when we add the functionality, we will be able to click this soundbar container, and that will actually adjust the volume of the video. Alright, the final button is the full screen button, and all I want to do with that is float it to the right. So let's reference that full screen button by its ID, full screen dash button, and let's float it to the right. And if we refresh it again, we see that the full screen button is now to the right of our video player within our buttons container. And this right here is basically the final styling for our video. Now there are just, I think, 3 more small things that I want to take care of before we actually wrap this video up. First one thing that I want to do is get rid of these red outlines. So I'll scroll up where we reference all the direct children of the buttons container, and I'm going to get rid of this 1 pixel solid red outline. So that already looks better. Next thing that I want to take care of has to do with selecting. Currently, if we drag our mouse over our video player, we're able to select everything. In order to fix that, we're going to use a new CSS tree property that we can use. Within our player, within the styling of our player, we're going to set the user select property, and we'll set it equal to none. And to make sure that this works across all browsers, we need to add the vendor prefixes for all browsers. So that's WebKit user select none, and that's Moz user select none, and MS user select none. And now, if we refresh it, our video player is no longer selectable by dragging the mouse over the video player. Now, the third thing that I wanted to do is these buttons don't really feel like buttons, because normally when you hover over a button with your mouse, it changes into this little pointer with a finger, which makes the user think that you can click it. And also when we hover this time field right here, our cursor changes into this capital I kind of thing, which makes the user think that this text should be selected or something. Well, this is not the case, because on this time field I want to change the cursor to default, and on all these buttons I want to change the cursor to a finger pointer, if you know what I mean. So let's quickly do that. First, let's go to that time field. Let's see, there it is. And let's set the cursor equal to default. And let's save it. And if we now refresh it and hover with our mouse over the time field, we keep our original cursor. Alright, next let's set the cursor for the buttons. Now everything that's going to be clickable, I'm going to reference right here. And let's add a small comment here. Everything below this line is a container. And above it is just some miscellaneous CSS. Now let's reference everything that's clickable. And those are the images, but also the progress bar container and the soundbar container. And all these elements, I want to have a cursor of pointer. If we now refresh the browser, whenever we hover with our mouse over a button, for instance this full screen button, it turns into this little hand with a finger, making us think that we can click it, which will be the case when we add the functionality. This also works for the progress bar container, the soundbar container, the sound button, and the play button. And just as a finishing touch, let's add some nice effect to our images by using the hover pseudo class. Normally, when we look at our images, when we are not hovering them, they have a background color of light gray. But whenever we hover them, by using this pseudo class, let's give them a background color of light blue. So RGB 50, 170, 220. And if we now save that and refresh the browser one last time, we can hover over these images, and as you can see, they turn blue when we hover them. Same for the sound button and the play button. Alright, so that's all about the styling for our video player, and in the next section we're going to take a look at JavaScript in order to add all the functionalities. So all of this source code will be available at cocotuts.com. I thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.